pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and Governor Healy's March 29th, 2023 revised order extending remote participation by all members in any meeting of a public body, this meeting of the Great Barrington Affordable Housing Trust Subcommittee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and parties with a right or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to listen to the meeting may do so in the following manner by seeing the instructions on the agenda. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. And so we are begun.
Okay.
Okay, so I thought that it would be helpful to start by just updating everybody on the changes that did occur in the Affordable Housing Trust meeting. So if you have, I'm not sure which copy of the slides got posted. So if you have a copy of the slides, could somebody tell me, do you see numbers on the bottom right corner for each slide?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
excellent. Okay, so I think we're all working from the same copy then. So if you go to slide 7, this is the slide that contains where the changes were made in the trust meeting.
Well, my printer actually cut the numbers in half, so
It says loan structure and administration.
got it.
So in essence, what this does is if a person complies with the program, it is really a granting program. So it's only then a loan for the period of 10 years, and then it would be 100% forgiven at 10 years is the change. The distribution, like the disbursement, would stay the same.
Yeah. And the repayment comes out.
And the repayment comes out. So I just wanted to give this committee an opportunity to be up to speed on that, and also to consider, are there any additional logistics or anything that we'd kind of thought about deeply that we'd want to revisit with these changes and tweak before a final vote?
Did we get any input from the legal people about whether 10 years is long enough?
That was not a question we sent to council because I cannot remember where we got the information, but we had the information that 10 years was enough, but we couldn't go lower. That 10 years was the minimum.
Okay.
And it was probably from somebody you consulted, Bill.
It might be, yes.
Yeah, I think it came from, I think my memory is of an email from you, and I was like, that's great. That's good information. So it would have been somebody in the trust network.
I'm not sure there was a legal requirement.
Yeah, you're not clear that there's a legal requirement.
Like for the 10-year thing wasn't based on a legal requirement, is what I'm saying. I think it was maybe a best practice, for example.
Yeah. Is there any legal requirement tied to trust fund money and restriction?
Mm-hmm.
Not trust fund.
In terms of,
trust.
The term of the restriction? No, I don't think so.
Just that there has to be a restriction?
I'm not even sure that there legally has to be. It's just good practice to ensure that you're getting what you're paying for.
Well, that is good perspective.
Certain legal statutes, like under CPA, require a deed restriction if you're actually acquiring the interest in a property. But this is just a grant for creation of a unit. It's not the same under CPA law.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Any other details here that we should attend to? this is where we were seeking legal counsel about, is it using a lien structure versus a contract only as an enforcement mechanism? Does that, one, do we have information about that? And two, does that change, does our thinking change with the structure change?
I do not have any follow-up for you on that.
I don't think it prohibits us from moving the proposal forward, because ultimately whatever we do will just be what town council tells us to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like we know that part already. So I think that just leaves us with, if in changing it to a loan to grant program, does that change our thinking at all about enforcement?
In what way?
In any way?
Hmm.
The answer may be no. I just wanted to make sure we thought about it. Like, does it still seem like it's appropriate to go with either a lien or a contract based on what council says?
Oh, yeah, I don't think it makes a difference for either of those options.
Joe?
Sort of a technicality. You're muted, Joe. Oh, there you go.
I don't have any thoughts.
Great. Chris, any thoughts?
No,
All right, it sounds like we'll just leave it at as is. All right, so that is, I don't have anything else I need us to discuss on this slide. One more pass before we move on to the scoring rubric. Anything else anybody would like to discuss related to the changes? Great.
No,
Jeremy's joining.
yes.
You made it, Jeremy. We were just about to move on, but I want to give you an opportunity. We're looking at slide 7, which is the slide that is titled Loan Structure and Administration.
Yeah, sorry. Let me bring it up again.
That's okay. We were just about to move on, but the question on the table was, is there anything that we should consider or fine tune now that we've made changes?
Yeah, when I looked at it earlier, I think the only comments I had were for something later on. So no, I don't think so on this one. Thank
Okay.
you, though.
Slide 8 has one change on it, but it really just, it's the same changes from the earlier one. So it specifies that takes out the 20-year provision for what would happen in a property sale. I don't see a need to discuss that. So that brings us to slide 11, which is where our work is really tonight, which is application selection criteria. So, and to remind everybody, the idea, and I don't know if Jeremy, if you were in the meeting where this was discussed and decided, was that we could subcontract the application process, and that would streamline issues related to privacy of applicants, and allow us to bring in expertise around housing and serving communities around housing in the process.
I only have 10 slides. My look.
What's that?
That's interesting. To my knowledge, I haven't added any slides. The last slide.
Okay. The last slide says applicant selection. That's slide 10, I think.
Yeah.
11.
On my slide
Great.
stack, it's 11, and I don't know why.
Okay, thanks.
It's 10 on, well, I can't tell what it is on mine. I've got only half the number. So it could be either 10 or 11.
I did nothing but open this file. So the discussion at the Affordable Housing Trust was kind of had two dimensions to it, and Bill and Joe, please jump in. But what I felt like I heard went in two directions. And one was just in general, could we build out the scoring? Like, we're handing this to somebody else. What if, looking at project viability, what's the scoring range, and what is at the low end, what's at the high end? And then the second part was, so that note on the slide that says rubric would speak to that, building a rubric will speak to that. And then the second was a more broad discussion about how are we measuring impact, and how do we think about impact in the application process? How does that shape? Do we think that do you go the route that you could say, all right, one way to make sure there's enough impact is that there's going to be a minimum of 2 grants? Or another way to think about it could be directing the overall distribution of funds to consider how many people are impacted. And so in that case, you could have a family in a residence, and all of the members of that family count plus the people who will be housed in the unit. But that was pretty broad. I don't feel like we had direction about how to think about impact, but direction to ask us to think about how to assess impact at this level. And then there was a specific request to add cost effectiveness as a issue. So Bill, if you allow me to share my screen, I will share a document that we can work in.
Okay. Let's see what to do here. Here we go.
You make her the host, or make her a host.
Yes. I've made you a host.
Do you want to let Eileen ask a question?
Oh, I didn't realize my hand was raised.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Sorry about that.
Then never mind. All right, you should be able to do that.
Okay.
You are now a host.
I think that I'm sharing what I want to share. Yes, it looks like I am.
Okay.
Great.
Project fund.
So this would be a way for us to kind of work through this. So on the left is the criteria that we'd want the subcontractor to score, and then we could sketch out what a 1 is and what a 5 is, for example.
Do we want to expand out goal 3 like 4 and turn that into more of a standalone thing?
Can
So
you
yeah, so goal, I guess, yeah, instead of referencing goal 3, let's make it into an actual thing.
Yeah. So the extent to which the landlord applicant demonstrates financial strain, if we mirror the language from above, meeting cost of living in Great Barrington, that an income restricted ADU would help alleviate.
Any chance you could zoom in a little bit on those criteria right there?
Yes.
Not that big on my screen.
So would you call this criteria need or something, or like owner need, landlord need?
Resident.
Well,
Uh,
it's just the landlord financial need, right?
Well, that the landlord has to be a resident. So it should be a hyphen.
Oh, okay. Sure.
How's that, Bill? Does that help?
Yes,
It means we'll have to slide around to get to 5, but that's okay.
So residency, to me, residency is just binary, right? Like it's either like, does it need to be one of these criteria? Because it's like either they meet the requirements or they don't, right?
That
yeah, for residency, that would be
ready to
true.
go. Oh, I don't want to open that can of worms. I guess my question would be to Chris then. Is that accurate? Like, is there an existing measure of residency that can make it binary for us? Can we not reinvent the wheel?
You're muted, Chris.
Well, I wasn't saying anything. I was using the mute button to let me think.
Oh,
So now I have to say, let me think.
Chris, isn't it just a certain number of days registered to vote and a certain number of days that you're occupying the residence a year?
So eligibility to register to vote would be a measure.
yeah,
I think that would possibly be the way to do it, registration. So you're choosing to make Great Barrington your permanent address. That would make you eligible to vote.
right.
So like a 1 is not eligible to vote.
And a 5. But Chris, isn't it don't you have to be in the town for a certain number of days a year? Isn't that part of it?
It may be. I don't know what, if it is, I don't know what that is.
Okay.
So if you are registered to vote, then somebody has made sure you meet whatever requirement that is.
Well, and
How's that?
I mean, is the requirement that you're eligible to register, or the requirement is that you're registered?
Registered.
Eligible.
Eligible.
Yeah.
Okay,
And that's clean, because there's other stuff that might come into play for how primary residence is determined for tax purposes or something. And
Yep.
like this seems clean, and it also is good because it's taxpayer dollars going to taxpayers, and
Right.
there's
Okay.
there's a loop there in
So-
order to support other town residents.
So,
Right.
so to be clear, that this should be a pre-screening, right? So this should be like you throw away the application if it doesn't have those criteria.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
So like it's not really going to add to the score. It's just you throw it away.
right.
Okay, so you'd want to pull that out of the score.
Yeah, I would just change all the numbers, but you don't have to do it now. But
Yeah, I agree. I think that's correct, because it doesn't really have a score. It's a yes or no.
Yeah.
And there are some criterions like living space. I don't know if we need to. So for the next one, where it's living space proposed, there are minimum and maximums that just don't even, that you can also use for pre-screening, because if it's too big, it's not an ADU, and if it's too small, it's not legal.
Oh, interesting thought.
Yeah, so just, that has to qualify as an ADU.
That's probably in the planning department somewhere. What
Bill,
qualifies.
I also feel like this was a place that that this was a place that you actually had brought this criteria to the forefront, that it matters how livable the space is.
Yeah. I mean, I think 150 square feet would be kind of tiny, but that might be allowed.
I do like the idea of making the bottom, like, 1 be the minimum allowed
Right.
and 5 be the maximum on like the square footage. Is there
Yeah.
anything besides square footage that needs to be considered in this area?
So are you thinking like amenities? Like, is it a, does it have a full kitchen? It's gotta be 4-season, right? So,
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
code sets regulations for square footage per room,
yeah.
basic sanitary. So not sure if you want to, again, reinvent the wheel or just tie it back to something that has received an inspection or a certification.
Yeah, just like they have to have a refrigerator because that's what the building code says and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Right. So if they have a certificate of occupancy, they should be fine.
The upper limit is 900.
But at the application point, they cannot have a certificate of occupancy yet.
Well, that's true. Yes.
So, like, what is it that their plans need to account for? And I love the idea of tying it to minimum requirements that exist. So if
Yes.
you all want to reference those, I will type them.
900 square feet is the maximum. But yes. It may not, an ADU may not in any case be larger than 900 square feet.
Okay, that's good.
But Chris, now that you can subtract out all the walls, right? It's wasn't that-
900 net usable square feet.
net usable.
Okay.
So that was something that just changed
just
in
out
Great Barrington.
of curiosity, what's the distinction there?
So especially with very efficient homes, the walls can be really thick. And so now it's like the livable space and you can minus out the walls.
Oh,
And
wow.
so so the exterior footprint might be larger than 900
Oh, yeah.
if it's one level.
Do we know what the minimum requirement is for an ADU?
I don't think there's not a minimum in zoning. It would tie back to the house code.
Well, and then the question is less square footage better, or is more square footage better for an ADU?
Chris, isn't there a minimum room size in the building code?
It's either in the building code or in the housing code. Yeah.
To your question, Bill, I think that I don't think that, like, I think what you're asking us to evaluate, to set up an evaluation for, is how livable the space is.
Yeah.
And so I don't think, I think that, like, if we were saying, well, the only way we're going to evaluate it is how much space there is, yeah, then I might raise that question. But I think that if we're saying it's going to be minimum allowable, like, it's going to be how much space there is, but it also has to do with some other things like the amenities or I think part of fleshing this out is that we would want a proposal that that is going to support a really livable small studio apartment to do better than a proposal that's like, I'm going to shove a sink in the garage and put a door on it, right?
Right. So, a full kitchen, essentially, not just like a microwave and a hot plate.
And
washer, dryer, things like that would be.
Yeah.
The magic number seems to be 150 square feet for every dwelling unit.
That's what I thought.
On the
150 square feet, and it's like 150 square feet is assuming like one person, I think.
And is that also net?
Is that also what? No,
Is it also net usable, do we know?
it's state code. It just says, well, I don't know, I'm looking at state code.
Yeah, so I would say you could discount the walls too. Make it net.
Okay.
Well, yeah, it says habitable floor space. That's the net distinction. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so a 5 has a full kitchen, a washer, dryer.
Full bath.
Full bath.
Mhm.
Alright, so then the a 1 would have the minimum allowed. And
Minimum.
do you know what that is? Are there rules about what you have to have in a kitchen to have it be a dwelling? I'm imagining there are.
I think it's, running water and cooking facilities and cleaning facilities. Again, this is outside of my
Okay,
housing code stuff. But I
maybe we can do
cannot,
additional research on that.
State sanitary code.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just Googling, so take it with a grain of salt. Is every dwelling unit must have what we think of as a kitchen, a bathroom, hot and cold drinking water, heat, windows, electrical outlets, lights, ventilation, and waste plumbing. So
thanks, Joe.
So if we could say meets minimum
minimum standards.
standards for
Dwelling unit.
Yeah.
dwelling unit, the water, sanitation, insulation, heat. Great.
Sure.
You could say state sanitary code, chapter T.
Excellent.
You say chapter G?
Chapter 2.
Great. So a 3 is going to be in a version of in between that. Do you think we can just give a scale, or do we need to rank each number exactly? And I would welcome your expertise, Chris, in terms of what you think the standard needs to be for assessing grants, like in terms of having transparency on how something's going to be assessed up front at an application process. Can we put out a simple scale of 1 to 5, or do we need to say what a 2 is, what a 3 is, and what a 4 is?
Yeah, if you're going to use a scale, you should say, give approximate value. So when we write an RFP, we say, we're looking for a company that has experience to do X, Y, and Z. It's highly advantageous if you have 10 years of experience. It's sort of advantageous if you only have 5 years of experience. It's not advantageous if you only have 1. So that's the way we rank RFPs. So think maybe in those terms. So it can still be general. You don't necessarily need to give it points. I remember, Jeremy, one time, might have been before you were on CPC, we tried to do applications by points. In the first meeting, it went haywire. So I know points might be tough, but
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm not saying points with 1 to 5 points. I'm saying like on a scale of 1 to 10, like 10, or a scale of 5 being the best, 1 being the least, but not that those translate to points.
Yeah, you could say such as this example is we will look very favorable on this, not so favorable on that. And in those sorts of terms.
So a 3 would be 525 square feet.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sort of thinking maybe that we just have for a scale, we have, you know, if 1 is X and 5 is something else, how do you rate the, you know, give it a point value of 1 to 5? I think trying to get specific on what each of these values is going to be tricky.
Mm.
But if I heard Chris correctly, that's what we're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Like it can be approximate, but we should be saying this is about how we should think about what a 2 is.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, for this one, I hear, I think from what I heard Bill going for is kind of like, if you think about Airbnbs, right? You go into an Airbnb and you're like, it was small, but they made really good use of the space.
Right.
I give it a 4 or something, you know, so it's like the numbers aren't exactly the thing, you know, it's like, is it like, you know, they just like made a space over a garage and didn't put a lot of work into it, even though it's, you know, technically 900 square feet, but it's like, it's not fully realized, or, you know what I mean? So you could have like a nicer unit that's actually smaller because it has more of the men, it's more thought out.
Right. That's exactly my
But-
point, is that it's really hard to determine how.
It is, and what I'm hearing is we still have to direct. We have to direct upfront how it will be evaluated.
Mhm.
So, well, it's
I mean,
almost,
the,
go ahead.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, the square foot thing seems easy to evaluate, right? Because you're talking about looking at plans.
Right.
But the other stuff, it's so subjective.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, even if you were walking through the space after the fact, it's still subjective.
Mhm.
And I mean, if you're going to put criteria, it has to be, you know, I mean, it's going to be hard to evaluate if it's that subjective, and then it's going to seem not fair to someone.
Mm. So we can make this criterion just like literally amount of square feet.
Yeah.
And then add a separate criteria that's like about that have a separate criteria that's about the subjective element of like suitability or something like that.
Well, or you can say like a 1 is going to be least advantageous and we'll consider least advantageous means on considering square footage and like minimum standards as a whole. So you might, you know, like maybe a 3 is, you know, maybe a 3 is it's smaller, but it has all of the amenities.
Right.
Yeah. But I'm saying like, what if you did like living space?
What if, yeah, size
Yeah,
as one
you're saying,
criteria.
like A is size.
And-
Yeah, I'm saying like, what if you just had like two, like one's quantitative, another one's subjective?
Yeah.
Because there are also like subjective things like location and, you know, does it have a yard and stuff like that.
Yeah, so we get to decide how.
That's right. You could say, does it have is it on public transportation? Is it,
Yeah.
Does it have, right? Does it have access to, I mean, in this case, you might want to say, does it have cell service, right?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, lots of people's minimum connectivity is probably their phone.
Mhm.
Well, unfortunately, there are
There's
parts of this
amazing
that don't have good cell service.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
amenities, do we include internet access? And that can include cell phone or,
Sure.
because
Yeah.
like I live in a dead zone, but I just use Wi-Fi for all my calls and I'm fine.
Yeah.
But if I didn't have access to good Wi-Fi, then I would have a problem. Amenities includes cell or internet.
Mhm.
All right, so now we just gave ourselves more work.
Yeah.
Might be good work, but I'm just thinking how we can get through this quickly.
Well,
For what
There you
it's
go.
worth, I think this discussion of internet and cell service is a little iffy. I mean, not usually what we talk. I agree it's becoming de rigueur and almost required, but I
It's
don't know, like stretch.
but I mean, so when my kid is looking for a place, it's one of their big financial considerations, right? Like thinking how they're gonna hook up. And so then a place that comes with that has internet. Yeah, I mean, you can almost think of it as like part of that 30%, right? Like, is it like I know it's not yet, but how far away
Yeah.
are we from that being part of 30%, especially,
Yeah.
when you're talking about remote work or remote school or, these kinds of things. And it's like, well, then maybe that's okay if you're, next to the library or walking distance from the library, right? So you have some
No,
other source, but yeah. I wonder, like in this, if you need to start considering those things, especially when you're talking about you're trying to make something affordable. It's like if the people that are like working for you, if you can't contact them, I know we're not supposed to contact them when they're not working, but like if they can't contact you, it's like, anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, since no one has a landline anymore, and this is probably not the circumstance where you would necessarily get a landline. Oh.
All right, so I'm just playing around with this.
Yeah, I think some sort of connectivity is as essential as electricity and heat.
Yeah.
So how would that look for amenities? Like I haven't resolved the cell service part because you've been discussing, but with like putting aside, how does this look as a scale?
That's not bad.
Yeah, that looks good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So
No, good,
wait,
good. No,
did you
no,
want to say something, Joe?
no. I don't want to add anything.
So is there, are we in general agreement about public transportation, access to public transportation would rank high, is worth its own scale, or is there discussion there?
I would leave it off myself. I mean,
You mean public transportation?
I wouldn't call it public transportation. I would call it, I would just have it be more like I would collapse cell service and public transportation into like location. Just be like location and yeah, I think location's the issue. So that
But
is,
how would you evaluate it? Because one person might be, I found the perfect place. Like is in the middle of nowhere as far as you can get in Great Barrington and be in nowhere but in Great Barrington.
Yeah.
And somebody else might be, I found the perfect place. I can get on the bus right outside my door.
then I think that you get into that with transportation too. Like if you're gonna rate it, then you're like putting your thumb on the scale of like, I think people should ride the bus. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think on the other end, right? So like if you're out in the middle of nowhere, then so the person that needs to come up with their own method of transportation if they're not remote working, right?
Right.
So then they have to find their way in. So like, you know, I mean, when you're downtown, you have access to transportation, but also access to work.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think, you know, if something's affordable, I think location is super important because that, you know, it's how much money do you spend to get to work, and then also how much time do you spend to get to work, right? Because it's the same thing, and you know, I
Yeah.
mean, it skews the whole thing that you end up with all of these things downtown, but in a
Well,
sense, you know, for affordable isn't that kind of what you want?
So
Because
that's
then the
what
pool
I,
is bigger.
Yes.
yeah. So what you're like listening to you, Jeremy, what it made me think is that's what I'd be thinking about if we were talking about how we evaluate like grants we're giving to larger building projects. But
Mhm.
in this case, I want to say because there's a dual purpose, and also because of the nature of Great Barrington and the nature of
Mhm.
public transportation in South County, I
Mhm.
actually don't think that we should assess these applications based on that.
Mhm.
actually,
Already going to be, I think, a small pool that are eligible to apply and
right.
can also figure out a way to make it work. I think
Mhm.
we should be careful of narrowing it.
And given our Tri-Town Connector bus service now, van service, you can get a ride from anywhere in town to anywhere else for a couple of bucks.
Yeah, sometimes. Uh,
Well, that's how all public transportation is in Berkshire
Yeah.
County. Yeah, sometimes.
no, I mean it's a wonderful thing. It's just
But
Oh.
isn't this scale to be able to choose between two different projects?
yeah.
So it's not a scale to just like eliminate one, like to eliminate a project, right? Oh, well, you didn't score high enough, sorry, you don't make it. Isn't it more when you have multiple projects you're choosing between and you're like, well, the ones that score higher are the more desirable ones?
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is I don't know that access to transportation makes this more desirable.
So what I'm saying is that when you have access to transportation, it opens it up to the people that can live there, right? So people with transportation can live there, and people without transportation can live there. And so to me, that's like the more people that this housing unit is available to makes it more desirable, right? So
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes.
like if it has all the amenities and it's more affordable, it's more desirable, you know.
Right.
Or if it has all the amenities and it's in the perfect location, it's more desirable, you know. And if like, you know, like the cost of it, if that's like the thing that's, and in this case it is making it equal, right? Because you're sort of, so the area mean income is sort of setting the, is, you know, I mean, I guess is setting whoever the maximum that they can pay or that they can spend on this unit.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So then all right, so if we accept that point, then how would you evaluate it based on the most accessible public transportation is the Tri-Town Connector? Wouldn't then it be that any property in Great Barrington would have access?
Well, no, because I still think walkable, right? So if you're downtown and you can walk to all the amenities of downtown, that's still like, if you don't have to get in transportation, that's gonna be better, right? Like if you can walk to get your groceries, if you can, you know, walk to the park, if you can, yeah, right? I mean, it's still more desirable. Or if like outside your door, like you walk across the street and there's the park, it's like, whoa, that should be an amenity, right?
And is it just walkability because Tri-Town will pick you up anywhere in Great Barrington?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, but like all of these kinds of things, it's even though it's available, like, so then you have to be comfortable, right, with using that system. So I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm saying it's a great thing that it's available, but it does, like, is that a limiting factor? The number of people that are going to use it. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but is everyone going to be comfortable using that?
Well, Tri-Town Connector is a pilot, and no, and
Yeah.
it's a pilot, and it may or may not get more money going forward. And it's a wonderful thing. I tried calling them, and you know, there's a lot of demand for it, so they're having trouble scaling. And so yeah, I mean, I just think there's a difference between like I literally like hadn't had a thing where I was like, I missed the bus, and I tried calling Tri-Town Connector, and they said you can come in a few hours, and then I managed to get the bus. So anyways,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Okay.
it's a thing. So
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? I'm saying that like what are we gonna pick and choose public transportation? Like
Well, so
the-
what I'm
the-
just,
the bus, like the
Yeah.
bus routes are also fairly unreliable. Like it's, and they go on like how many streets in Great Barrington?
Right, not many.
So
what,
are we really talking about walkability? Because I don't like, I don't.
how about just access, right? So it's like if you can walk to Big Y or Price Chopper, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Like if you live like anywhere within Main Street versus Housatonic, you can walk to Price Chopper or a Big Y if you feel like it. And
well, and then also like being able to walk or ride a bike to work. So I live right off of Stockbridge Road, and I mean, I and I know the community, and so I see a lot of people that are going to and from work on the sidewalk, either walking or on a bike. And and if you're like, are you going to be doing that if you're out on the Egremont border and and you work downtown? Like, I don't know if you're really going to do that. And so I'm not saying that that's a bad place to put an ADU, but I'm saying if you're going to score them, maybe in this category, it's a lower score. So I mean, there might be other things that bring the score up, but
Okay.
Yeah, we probably should have a category called location, and under that is the internet access and the walkability factors and things like that.
exactly, yeah, just
or it can just be amenities, right? So
Oh, yeah.
like you might be right next to Big Y, but not next to the library, right? And so like they score differently, but I don't know,
Yeah, it'll be hard to score.
Yeah.
I do think it makes sense to be its own category because
Yeah.
the category we were in was living space.
Yeah, I think it's different from, certainly square footage and whether it has a dishwasher or whatever, but yeah.
It's almost like amenities are like a separate category because, right, like location, you can see that as an amenity because,
Yeah.
if you have access to work, that's kind of an amenity. If you have access to transportation, that's an amenity. If you have access to grocery stores, that's an amenity.
Yeah.
So the whole category could just be
Do
amenities.
we want to put in, well, no, because amenities is covering.
Well, I think when you have like the physical inside amenities, right? Like So you have like a 3-piece bathroom, you know, or, you know. And, you know, with the washer and dryer, it could be like washer and dryer on the property, right? And then 5 maybe washer dryers in the unit, you know, and
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
and 1 is like, there's no washer and dryer. You have a sink.
Yeah, 1 would be access to a laundromat.
And 2, there's a clothesline.
Right.
All right. Back to Instagram. Yeah. Actually, yeah, I like that as a really narrow location, because I think the core issue is like is assigning a numeric value to different parts of Great Barrington.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, I think groceries and work, right, are the 2 things, I think.
Yeah.
You know, so if there's, you know, so it could be restaurants, right? But it might not just be restaurants for going out to eat. It might be restaurants, so a place to work at.
Yeah. So it's not a moral judgment about living out in the country. It's just
No.
it's access to livelihood.
Where the most of the jobs exist in town.
Yeah.
All right.
So if it happens to be an ADU on some farm, it's like, whoa, wait, you might have seasonal food and, you know, and work.
So you want that to be food?
Want to say work?
We can't,
Access to goods.
because we don't know what
Yeah.
what the employment is of the applicant.
Right.
Yeah.
ADU.
Yeah.
But that's why Main Street can be a proxy for where most jobs are in town. So just a question for anybody who might know, there are rules about, are there any rules about windows dwelling spaces in Massachusetts? Does anybody know?
Sure.
There have to be windows, yes.
Yeah. So meets minimum windows requirements.
Yeah.
I mean, I think for 1, you need to be able to get a CO, right? Like it's going to meet the minimums to get a CO,
Yes.
because then it's going to have all that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it has to meet the minimum building code requirements.
Yeah.
That covers all that. It doesn't have to have a big picture window, you know, it can just have little windows, but gotta get a little sunlight in.
5, it's going to be like, you know, position, so you're receiving southeastern light and
I was gonna go with strong natural light.
for 5.
Yeah. Or I think 2 is
It's
more
kind of a
than
high, it's
minimum
kind of a
windows.
Yeah.
3 is some good windows, good number of windows.
I'm gonna sign off. Unless
Thank you,
something else.
Chris.
Trying to promote
Just losing
Fred.
steam. That's all. Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you. This has been very helpful.
Thanks, Chris.
Ananda, I think I actually made you the host so you could share your screen, but now I can't promote Fred to panelist.
So
Fred-
meaning you have to do it.
Yeah. Participants.
Yeah, I'm just not seeing where my options are for participants.
I can't I can't promote anybody anymore.
I see if I can find, there we go. All right, so let me share again.
Yeah, I think you can actually promote him to a panelist. Anyhow,
Yeah, he's talking permitted.
okay.
Oh, sorry, if Fred, I apologize. If you're willing to run with how I promoted you, I would appreciate it. But you should, I can see your name and we should be able to hear you. Several windows. Good natural light.
Mhm.
Okay.
Sure.
It's 7:30 and we completed 2.
Mhm.
I think that we know, like, for the location one that we just added,
Yeah.
will follow a similar format, right? That it'll be
Yeah, that's fine.
like a 1 will be you have to like requires transportation to get to groceries / food and Main Street.
Yeah.
A 5 will be doesn't require like walk like within walking distance, and then we'll just rank the middle.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay with that, I will figure out how to type that at some point. And
That's
then
fine.
cell coverage will be basically the same thing. None to,
right.
there's always coverage.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's good.
And the cell coverage can be like internet, right? So it could just be Wi-Fi, right? So if
Well,
the
so what I did was I put internet into 3 under amenities. So you'll see
Yeah.
now that like a 5 has a full kitchen, washer, dryer, full bath, and high-speed internet.
Mhm.
Oh, okay,
A
Yeah.
1 doesn't have any high-speed internet.
I see.
Mhm. Yeah,
A
that's good.
2 has all of the basics plus at least 1 of the listed amenities.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, this is good.
Okay.
Okay.
So, we usually have to stop by 8. Is that still true for people?
It's true for me.
Great.
I feel like the financial need one, or I feel like the cost effectiveness was the sort of sticking one.
The cost effectiveness and impact, we haven't thought through at all. Do we want to see, like, for project viability, is there an easy ranking system we have in mind that we could assign to somebody to draft?
No,
All right, so that, so
Uh,
I think what I'm thinking then is that we probably aren't going to quite get there tonight. So let's pick what we are going to get done.
cost effectiveness or the, yeah, I would say cost effectiveness or cost effectiveness and impact.
okay.
So what does that mean to us? Like,
Scoring.
what would a 5 be?
20% or less of the funding provided by the housing trust.
I thought 20% of the, I was thinking more like bang for buck. So I was thinking amount of money to, well, I guess that's what I guess I don't understand the difference between impact and cost effectiveness. I think that's the problem for me.
I think impact, if I understand it correctly, is the number of people affected by the creation of this unit.
Oh,
No.
we haven't decided what impact is.
No,
Well, to me,
That's one possibility.
cost effectiveness is impact. So that's why I'm confused. To me, like 20, like say like 20,000 to create one affordable unit would be impact / cost effectiveness.
All right, but I would put on the table that if we chose, let's say we had two applications. And I know we're gonna rank financial needs separately,
Mhm.
but I want us to think about how they sit together. So since one of the purposes of the project is to meet financial need of the resident the Great Barrington resident landlord,
Mhm.
does it make sense to then be in this other category? Your best score is going to go to the people who already have the most money for the project. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, don't they kind of cancel each other out if we go that way?
Yeah.
But
The-
then do you change that with impact then? Like, is impact the inverse of that, right? So, I mean, but not necessarily, because you could have something that they just, because of sweat equity, or because they're a electrician, or because they're a plumber, that
there's
it
other
makes it
ways we
very
could-
cost effective.
Yeah.
But impact could be, like, how are you changing the life of the resident and the renters, right? Or impact, yeah, I guess impact has to be, or also you could consider, like, how it impacts the town, right?
yeah.
So on cost effectiveness, what if we thought about it in terms of not how little money we are spending, but how cost effective, like how well for the total budget of the project, how cost effective is the total budget for what you get for the project?
It's going to be really hard for people to submit because
It's gonna,
if they haven't already bid the job out, how would they know? How would anybody know how much it's going to cost and how effective it's going to be?
yeah, it's gonna skew it to people. If you want to do this, it's gonna skew it to people that are in the trades, right?
Yeah.
Because they're gonna be able to bid this thing the lowest.
Yeah.
They're gonna get a bunch of favors, and they're gonna get,
Well, no, I mean, like, there is I could imagine that there's somebody out there who doesn't have a lot of money and their month to month cash flow is tight. They do have an access to a small amount of savings, but the savings are small enough that if they were using them for cost of living, it doesn't solve the cost of living problem, right? But they're significant enough that they could make a project like this viable with a grant. So I think they're to me, cost effective is, am I like, oh, this would be a fun thing to do, and my plan is like really elaborate, and so there's a lot of extra stuff and it's going to cost a lot of money, versus a project that's really streamlined and it really looks at how do we use each dollar to get the best impact out of the project. And to your question, Bill, I don't see a way we can be asking anybody, whether us or anybody else, to review applications where there isn't a stage in the application project where you're looking at some financial feasibility. So I don't know what that will look like. Somebody has their
Yes, somebody has something on.
Oh, that's me. Sorry.
okay.
So I don't think you're gonna like this, Ananda, but what I just want to put out there is, to me, what would be very simple is just like, 1 is 10,000, 2 is 20,000, up to 50,000. And I don't, so that's a cap. So to me, like,
But nothing ensures that, like, that just is that's not really cost effective. That's just like
no, it would just
how
become,
much money we give people.
yeah, but I mean, in terms of scoring, it'd be like we'd be done with this column, and then one of the concerns about the cap is just this idea of like, what if the scenario where where everything goes to the one mythical $150,000 project.
Well, and I think you address that with impact.
Yeah, I mean, so each of these right now we're talking about each of these criteria as being equally weighted. If we're gonna get like just like a holistic number out of it. So anyway,
But we aren't actually talking about it being a point system. We're just talking about like this is how applications should be evaluated from a weak to strong.
okay, well, so
it does boil down to a point system then.
I think the problem is that we have a rubric, we hand the rubric off to the contractor. And part of the reason why we're doing that is essentially to make the process sort of like auditable, like make it so that if somebody asks like, well, how did you pick this person over that person? You say, well, they got a 33 or something.
Yeah.
No, it's not a point system. And like if you look at like that, I mean, like that's not like it's a weak to strong system as opposed to like assigning a number of points to any given evaluation.
So yeah,
like that's what Chris described to us was to set up something that was approximate. And I mean, I've done application systems that use points for scoring, and you can do it. I just think it's another level that we haven't gotten to. And I don't think we need to. I don't think that actually helps. You just have to say up front, this is how it's going to be assessed.
I think we would actually be, it's not a big deal, but I would say given that, we would probably be better off only having 3, because I think if you have 5, it really suggests points.
Yeah.
The problem.
I looked at what Fred put in the draft RFP he was working on, and I believe it varied from criteria to criteria, but it was 4 or more often.
Okay, the actual thing doesn't matter too much. It's just the thing that you want. I don't know if it would become a concern. The thing you're trying to protect against is somebody saying this is arbitrary and capricious. So it's like you're guarding against someone saying like, well, this guy got a 20 and this guy got a 35. You're like, no, it's not a scoring system. And they're like, okay, but you have numbers, and then
we'll take like I can take the numbers off the top of the column. We can like.
That's what I'm saying. If you
make that strong to weak, and
if you make it strong,
that confusion,
make it strong to weak, then it's more clearly
yeah.
It's a sort of holistic thing.
Yeah.
So then the question of like cost effectiveness, you could leave that more squishy, like more holistic of essentially like you could just make it something like makes best use of dollars or something like that, or makes so it'd be like relative to the total amount of the fund, basically. Be like,
but did you understand what I was saying? That like, are we talking about it's cost effective to us, or is the project itself cost effective?
I think we don't.
I'm not particularly interested in like I think that if we do the project itself is cost effective, that is high value to us.
Yeah.
Versus that it's just cost effective to us doesn't speak to like, so we could be like, oh, it's cost effective to give somebody a $5,000 grant on a project that is low financial need and the project itself isn't cost effective. Like I wouldn't want that to get a high score in this system.
Right.
Well, why? It's just one criteria. I think that's the issue, is that if it's one criteria, if it's not a point system, then you would just want it to be surfaced, because if you already have other things that are talking about impact. So
Right.
it's
But what I'm saying is that, like, to me, cost effective, like, it isn't necessarily a good use of public dollars just because it's the smallest grant. That those two things are not, like, a small grant does not necessarily equal cost effective.
yeah, I see what you mean.
A small grant could be applied to a very cost ineffective project that could still have high financial need. I don't know.
Could we use a per square foot cost of some kind?
Estimated makes best.
Yeah, I
use
mean,
of
if you're building
estimated.
it for $200 a square foot or $400 a square foot, I
Sure.
mean, that's sort of cost effective.
And you're talking about our money going in, right?
No, I'm talking about the entire project. The cost per square foot. Is it,
I guess
$200
saying is-
or is it $500 a square foot?
what I'm saying is, why would you mix those two? You're mixing two things. So you
No, Bill and
So-
I are talking about the same thing.
no, okay. So there's a goal of creating affordable housing, and there's a goal of supporting resident landowners who have financial need. Those are two goals, right?
Mhm.
So cost effectiveness that leads to more affordable units helps one goal.
Mhm.
Impact helps the other goal. So why are you trying to put impact into cost effectiveness?
I don't see it that way. So I see it as that cost effective is how it is the project itself a cost effective project, which is separate from financial viability. And I do think should be assessed. Impact to me is separate from that.
Yeah.
Impact is number of people.
It could be number of people, it could be number of grants. Like, I think there's ways that we can think about that. We could be like, we want to have, we want to select projects to allow for a minimum of 2 grants. So that's going to narrow the project pool to projects that are financially viable, meet these other criteria, and also we have enough money to fund at least 2. You could do it that way. You could be the more people impacted is how we measure impact. And so in that category, applications that have larger households attached to them will have a higher score just in that category.
Hmm.
I guess in that sense, then I would go the other way, and I would just get rid of cost effectiveness and only look at impact. Because yeah, I guess I don't know. I don't really see the value of trying to figure out how much money was spent on something separate from what we spent.
I don't think it's not even separate, right? It's that I do think there's value in saying the projects that are designed in ways and planned for in ways to maximize how far any dollar involved in this goes to providing the dwelling unit, the accessory dwelling unit, that's a better project. A project that does that in a cost-effective way is a better project that does that in a cost-ineffective way.
Right, which is why I think price per square foot would be a good indicator of that.
I mean, that sounds fine.
You makes forest use of estimated cost per square foot
Yeah.
to makes best use.
Sure, that's fine.
And
So-
then
Fred wants to. You can just talk, right, Fred?
Yeah.
yeah, Fred, go ahead.
We can't hear you, Fred.
You must be muted because
It
you're not.
doesn't- On my screen, it doesn't look like you're muted, Fred.
Mine either.
We should be able to hear you.
You want
Um,
to try and promote him to a panelist?
yeah, let me see if I can open the.
I've lost the ability to do that. Unless you want to make me a co-host, I could give it a shot.
All right. It does say that talking is permitted for you, Fred.
He took his hand down.
There we go. I can promote you to a panelist.
Yeah.
Okay. Fred, do you want to try again?
He took his hand down, so maybe.
Okay. We have 12 minutes. Do we want to use 5 of them on
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then
and
And
then with speak times?
yes,
All right.
Yes.
we can see you.
Jeremy, you had suggested framing impact around how are you changing the life of the resident and the renters? Discussion around that using that frame.
I mean, it can, I mean, but there's, you know, I mean, there's lots of ways you can do impacts.
So far we've surfaced 3
Yeah.
ways. There could be more. How are you changing
Mhm.
the life of the resident and the renters? Using number of people impacted by individual projects as a proxy, or defining a minimum number of grants, in which case I think it would come off of the rubric, but be a set to the subcontractor that it's gonna be, there has to be a minimum number.
Well, I think the minimum number would probably be 1 landlord and 1 renter.
Yeah, so what if it's a impact creates 1 affordable housing unit? Impact creates 1 affordable housing unit for 1 landlord.
Well, I mean, it has
Yeah.
to. That's,
You know what?
yeah, so that's
Act-
the minimum.
It's okay.
I'm not sure we really need impact. I'm not sure what that tells us.
I think, so I'm not wedded to this category, but if, like, I think this is the discussion that we've had at the trust about varying levels of comfort with the idea that there's just 1 pot and we're not setting a maximum dollar amount per grant or setting a block grant structure.
Mhm.
Impact is a way to engage the issues around that without going either of those routes. And my argument, which I've said before, is that in the pilot phase, at least, I see a lot of advantage to keeping that open and then taking what we learn from this process and evaluating that kind of maybe we keep some of the questions on the table about should we go with a block grant or should we go with there's a maximum amount on the grant, but use the pilot to answer them. Because we don't, like, 150,000 is a large amount of money for many of us, but in the construction world it's not, and in the cost of doing a project like this it's not. And since we do want to maximize the financial impact for the landlord, I think having flexibility is the best way that we'll be able to maximize how many people impacted on the grant side at this stage. Because we don't know what people are gonna apply with as resources or what they're gonna need.
Right.
But after we do this, we'll know more.
No.
So can we say something like, just like, one is creates the most number of affordable housing units, or one is creates the minimum, creates one additional affordable housing unit. No, that's not right. Sorry.
That's all we can do.
Yeah, what I mean is the idea is that you can only evaluate this once you have all the applications in. So then the last criteria you say, so minimum impact is one, is no, it's no, it would just be like
So it would be, but it would be a studio.
yeah, I know.
And there's one resident that's in the landlord's rental unit,
Yeah, but this is more like uses.
in their landlord's residential unit.
Can I?
But
How about something like this? Allows for it's less favorable if it allows for fewer grants, and is most favorable if it maximizes the number of grants.
What do you mean by grants? The money that we're giving them?
Yeah. So in other words, if you're going to phrase it this way, highest number of residents of in the landlord's residential unit.
I don't think there's going to be that much difference between the number of residents in most places.
Because they're small, you can only put so many people on them.
Yeah.
Well, no, but what I'm saying is, like,
but-
there's a difference between, let's say you have a family that's a couple with 4 kids. And
Yeah.
they want to add an ADU, and the ADU they can add is going to be multi-room. So potentially it could rent to, at minimum, like a couple, maybe it could rent to a couple and another child. That would be like the maximum impact something like this program could have, I would say. And
Okay.
like, and we don't know who renters are going to be, but we can say this type of unit that would maximize the renter side. And then the other end would be the minimum, a studio, which is like maybe a couple's going to live in, but is more likely going to have a single person. And the landlord applicant is also a single person living alone.
So, okay. So,
It kind of is a way to think about, like, instead of using the grants as a way to spread it, we're like looking at, we're maximizing the number of people impacted per project. The more people impacted, the higher the score.
So we're gonna do citizen speak and all that, and we have to come back to this, and I guess maybe we'll come back to it next week. Wait, hold on. So we are leaving out the criteria that potentially favors a cheaper over that we're leaving out the criteria that favors having more grants over fewer grants. And so like that to me is not good. So that's what we're gonna have to come back to. So I think we either do a cap, or we have a criteria that functions as a, like something that says like 3 is better than 1.
Right. And that's
Right,
where
right now there's nothing that says 3 grants is better than 1.
right. That's where we disagree, because I don't actually think that universally 3 is better than 1.
And I think 3 is better than 1. So that's the problem that we're hitting against, because to me there are 2 goals. One is creating affordable housing units, and the other is helping the owner. And we've talked about this privately. Is like, I don't care as much about that goal. My
Right.
goal is to create affordable housing units. So I'm okay with that being a co-equal goal, but I'm not okay with just throwing away the goal of creating more affordable units.
Right.
But yeah, we'll come back to that.
Hear from Jeremy and then move to, if there's any other members speak, and then citizens speak.
So one of the things we saw on CPC with Construct's grant request for Is it Windflower? Is it? I always mix up the two. But anyway, so they have I think it's like a 3-bedroom house on the property that they have not been able to rent, which is like a monthly ongoing rental because they can't get a family that qualifies. So in order to occupy that space, it needs to be a family of a certain size under a certain income. And because of that, they want to change the use to something to more temporary, where the size of the family doesn't matter because it's a temporary use. So if you're going to use this metric and score really high on a unit that can have more people, it might make it the criteria for qualifying for this unit like so narrow that the impact's going to be very low because you can't rent it. So I don't know. I mean, some like, so, you know, if you can, so since you're talking about like a particular amount of money, you know, like if you can get 3 units out of that, you would think that might be a high. I mean, I think that is on some level, it's a high impact. But in terms of like how it affects I don't know if it's in this category or another, but how it affects the resident, you know, I mean, I think that's more need. Like, so if they have some
Right.
sort of financial need that this grant could then, you know, facilitate them being able to stay in that home long term, then amazing, right? And so I mean, I think yeah, like on that level, I think the impact is that way. But I wonder, like, the impact on the other side, just because of who are you really talking about that can qualify for these rentals? Not in terms of to build them, but in terms to rent them.
And we will end on that note.
Or citizen speak.
Well, yeah, well,
Yeah.
member speak. Is there anybody else who has something else they want to say before we move to citizen speak? Fred?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I was going to say basically what Jeremy said, that I think that impact has to do more with the quality of the people that you know, if somebody's in danger of losing their house and they can build this unit and get income in it, that's a positive impact. The type of people who are in challenging situations that come in to this unit, that's a positive impact. I think that that's the kind of impact that we want to talk about. As far as cost effectiveness goes, I think that I would stay away from a dollar value per square foot. I think that that can be arbitrary and not always applicable. What if you were converting a garage versus building a freestanding building, for instance? I think what we were talking about is efficiency, and that would be the watchword that I would use for cost effectiveness. How efficient are you at using the dollars in your project budget to create housing? And I don't know what the rubric is, 1 to 5 there,
How
but
do you determine that? Yeah.
that's it.
Any other member comments before I open it to citizens?
No.
All right, citizen speak. One more chance. Eileen, press. Questions or comments?
No, this has been interesting.
All right. And that concludes our meeting.